Welcome back to our channel, entrepreneurs. I'm Pankaj Raval, and today we're going to be covering an exciting topic. It is the 10 essential items that every entrepreneur needs to know when starting a business. Now, if you're thinking about starting a business or if you already just started one, this is something you do not want to miss. Can't wait to get into it. Let's go. So the first thing we want to cover is the business itself. What kind of business do you want to be? Do you want to be a sole proprietorship? Do you want to be an LLC? Do you want to be a corporation? Do you want to be an S corporation? Do you want to be a partnership? There are numerous types of business entities you could start, and it's really important to think about what makes most sense to you. Now, initially, if you're just a single founder, or maybe there's one or two of you, there's also going to be tax considerations you want to have in mind when you're choosing your entity. Now, anyone who says, oh, I just want to be an LLC without thinking about the implications of taxes is making a grave mistake. So, depending on the type of business you're starting, you really want to think about what makes sense for me. If you're not planning on making a ton of money and maybe it's just you trying something out, the cheapest and simplest way to do it is through a sole proprietorship. You can get that started without really doing much at all. You set up a business, you can maybe file a DBA if you have a different business name, and then you're off to the races. You can use your social security number for opening up a bank account and start operating. And when it comes to filing your taxes, you would file them on your standard tax form. If you're now looking to maybe scale up, if you plan to have a larger business, maybe you have a lot of contracts, maybe there's more liability and you want to have that legal separation, then you want to think about a limited liability entity such as an LLC, an S corporation, or a corporation. These are the three main entities. There are other entities out there that you could consider. Some get kind of exotic, but for now, these are the three main you want to think about. When thinking about which one makes sense to you, you want to consider, okay, what am I trying to do with this business? Am I trying to raise money? Am I trying to just build a kind of lifestyle business that's going to throw off a lot of profit? Because that's also going to matter when it comes to the type of entity you choose. When it comes to picking a business, think about what are your goals? What do you want to achieve? And what are the tax implications? Okay, those are the three main things you want to consider early on. Now, as you grow, there's going to be more complexity as stock options, as equity comes into play. But early on, those are the essential questions you want to be asking. And if you're a tech company, oftentimes looking for a venture capital, I would say a Delaware C corporation makes a lot of sense. But really depends on what you're looking to do. There is no one size fits all solution. And another thing to keep in mind, lastly, is that nothing is final. You can always change types of entities later on. You can start as a sole proprietorship and then move to an LLC, and from an LLC, maybe to a corporation, even to an S corporation. However, moving back from S corporation to another entity poses some challenges sometimes because you're limited in how many times you can go back and forth. Keep these things in mind as you think about the type of entity you want to start, and I'm sure you'll do fantastic. The next thing you want to consider when starting a business is hiring and employment laws. Now, this is an area that a lot of business owners get tripped up on. As a lawyer, I see this problem all the time. I've heard a statistic that over 70% of the lawsuits that business owners face are due to employment matters. This is a very important area to focus on. Now, the two main things you want to think about is the initial hiring. Who are you hiring? Are you going to be looking for an employee, or are you going to be looking for a contractor? These are two very different types of staff members you're going to be having. An employee, you have specific legal obligations to them. There's a whole body of law in terms of employee rights that differs by state and on the federal level. So there's huge amounts of complexity with hiring people. And these are things you want to think about as you bring on your first person. When it comes to hiring an employee, you want to make sure you're utilizing the software technologies out there that'll make your life so much easier. For example, I use Gusto for managing our employees, and it makes life so much easier because they do a lot of the tax filings, quarterly filings that you need to do, and it just takes a huge burden off my shoulders, and it's one less thing I need to worry about. And as a business owner, you want to make sure that you are able to focus on the business and not these administrative issues that can be oftentimes a nightmare and take up a lot of your time early on as an entrepreneur. The next thing you want to consider is classifying the person that you're hiring. Are they going to be an employee, or are they going to be a contractor? Oftentimes people say, oh, I just want to make everyone a contractor. That is not the right move. And the reason is that not everyone qualifies as a contractor. Fundamentally, most laws say that when you hire someone, the default is that they are considered an employee unless they meet the higher standard of being considered a contractor. And what that standard is differs on the federal and state level. Different states have different rules on this. But what you need to know is that if you are exerting a considerable amount of control over that person, most likely they're going to be an employee. okay? And if you want to consider them a contractor, think about having them have their own entity, act as consultants to you with their own business entity. That is oftentimes one good way to get around this issue. However, it does not solve the issue, okay? I want to make it clear that just because you create an LLC or this person creates an LLC and now you're hiring the LLC, it doesn't solve the problem always unequivocally. You also have to consider the other factors of classification and the tests that are applied on a federal and state level. But fundamentally, it's very important that you classify people correctly. The last thing you want to consider with hiring is compliance with the laws on the state and local levels. Cities can have their own rules and regulations regarding time off, paid leave, and then you have also state laws, and then you have federal laws. You want to make sure that you are compliant with all of these. There are several fractional HR companies out there that you can hire to help you navigate this. And if you're thinking about hiring a lot of people, I highly encourage you to have someone on your staff who understands HR laws, who understands employment laws, and can help you navigate these issues as they come up. And always keep great records. And if you're going to have hourly workers, you want to make sure they're taking meal and rest breaks, and this all needs to be recorded. And luckily, we live in a time where there's ample technology out there to do that. There are so many different options to make sure that you are recording and keeping the records of when people take meal breaks and when people take rest breaks. Because if you don't do that, now there's a claim, you're going to be on the hook, not the employee. Most states are in favor of employee rights. They want to make sure you're not abusing your power as an employer. That means you have to have meticulous records of what your employees are doing and when, because if there is a claim, now you can go back to those records. Without records, unfortunately, it's usually going to go against you in terms of any claim that could come up. The next thing I want to talk about is intellectual property. Now, intellectual property is a fascinating area that's also kind of complex. There are fundamentally 4 different types of intellectual property you want to think about. There are patents, there are trademarks, there are copyrights, and there are trade secrets. Those are the kind of 4 broad areas of intellectual property. And in those areas are vast amount of complexity. People oftentimes focus on one area. For example, our firm focuses a lot on trademark law and copyright law. We don't handle patents here, but we work with fantastic patent attorneys. And what you need to think about is when it comes to intellectual property, make sure you are getting it right in terms of what you're looking for, okay? If you're looking for protection for a invention, if it has some kind of utility, oftentimes you want to look at patents. However, if you're looking for protection over a brand name or a slogan, that's a trademark. And if you're looking to protect a tangible idea in the form of that tangible idea, like a graphic art, a piece of graphic art, a sculpture, that would be copyrights. And then there are trade secrets. Those are things that maybe don't fall into these 3 categories. Trade secrets are things that you can protect through an NDA, through a contract, because they don't always fall under the protections given by patents, copyrights, or trademarks. So that's kind of the universe of intellectual property. And when you're starting a business, you want to make sure you're protecting that intellectual property early. Oftentimes the question comes up that when should I get a trademark? When should I file a patent? Well, you need to do it soon, especially with patents. One thing people don't realize is that with patents, if you disclose an invention, you have 1 year to actually file something to protect that invention. You can file a provisional patent, that'll be enough, but you need to file something, otherwise you could lose your rights to that invention if it's made public and it's public for over 1 year. These are important pieces of information to remember, and you do not want to lose your rights to that invention because that could obviously sink your whole business and have major consequences down the line. The next thing you want to consider is trademarks, okay? With trademarks, people ask, oh, do I need to file it now? Does it matter? Well, if your brand matters, then yes, but I'm not going to stand here and tell you that every brand is critical to the success of a business, okay? Some businesses rely more on brand identity than others, but if your business is one of those, in maybe cosmetics, apparel, the other areas, if your brand is important to your business and the success of your business, and that brand identity is important to protect, file something soon. And what you can do is, if you haven't started selling anything yet, if it's a while before you even get into the market, file something called intent to use. The intent to use application allows you to protect that name before it actually enters the market. That means that your name will be saved on the trademark register, and you'll have up to 3 years to file something called a declaration of use that says that you are actually using it in commerce. It's really important that you protect this IP early. And then when it comes to copyright, you can always file copyright registrations as well. It's important you do that soon after creating the work. The longer you wait, the more chance it is that you may be giving up some rights or that you may not be able to get the best protection. It is best to file a copyright within a few months of the work being created, and ideally when it's published or before it's published, so you are protected. The benefit of a registration is that you can now file lawsuits in federal court you can get attorney's fees, you can get other damages that you wouldn't be eligible for without a registration. So that's the importance of registration. It creates the presumption that you actually own the IP. Without that, there could be an argument as to, do you own the IP, do you not? And then lastly, one of the most important things I want to leave you when it comes to IP is that you need to make sure you have an IP assignment when you're a business owner. That means you need to make sure that whoever you hired to help you with that IP, if anyone else was contributing to creating that IP, you need to have an IP assignment agreement in place saying that, hey, business owner or business, you own the IP, not this consultant that worked with you. I've had several clients run into this problem with trademarks, with copyrights, with even patents. If someone else worked on something and they don't assign you the IP, or there's no written agreement saying, hey, who owns what, you could run into a very big problem down the line as to that person making claims to that IP saying, oh no, well, I just created it for myself and I licensed it to you. It's not actually yours. Don't even risk that, okay? And you avoid that dilemma by having a signed IP transfer agreement or IP assignment agreement in place early on before you start working with this person. Those are my key insights on IP. All right, you still with me? Next, we're moving on to consumer protection laws. Now, this is important when you're advertising a product. When you're advertising anything, you have to be truthful about what you're saying about the products. For example, in one instance, I had a cosmetics client that received a letter from a lawyer saying that you did not make accurate claims about the benefits of this product. You were making claims that make it sound like this product has some medicinal purpose or has some medicinal use that is not cleared by the FDA, therefore you were in violation of these laws. It was very scary. The client had spent thousands of dollars to defend that. Luckily, we were able to help the client out, and we were able to find some holes in that argument that was made by this other lawyer and save the client a lot of money. But the truth is, this is a huge risk for a lot of brands out there. If you're in an industry that maybe makes a lot of claims about the benefits of products, supplements, cosmetics, whatever it may be, and you're making it sound like it has some medicinal purpose, now you could be violating some FDA law. You could also be violating FTC laws about the truth in advertising, and you could be in real hot water. So it's really important that you are truthful, that you have someone review the claims you're making, because an inaccurate claim, a claim that may be misleading, could really land you in hot water. The next part of the consumer protection law that I want to talk about is product liability. So this comes up if you're selling any kind of goods. If you have products that you're manufacturing, that you're selling, there is a claim that if someone gets hurt from those products, you will most likely be sued, because product liability attorneys sue everyone in the chain of title to those products. That means anyone from the creator of some of the inputs and raw materials to the person who is distributing that product. Everyone will be sued most likely if there's a harm done by that product. So you want to make sure you have ample insurance. Insurance is critical when it comes to product claims, and making sure that you have someone defending you in the event that a claim is made. Because even if you have indemnification clauses in contracts, even if you say, hey, if something happens, you're responsible, you're most likely going to be named in that lawsuit, and you're still going to have to spend some money to defend or at least argue that you're not on the hook because of this contract. So better to have great insurance in place, and make sure you're doing your due diligence. Make sure you're doing proper QC. Make sure you're testing the product. Make sure that it is in fact safe in the market, because you do not want to be in a situation where someone is hurt from something you created, because that will probably spell the end of your business. Some businesses have been able to recover from it, but it's very difficult and very expensive. So I would just say, make sure you're very careful with what you're creating and that it's safe for the market, because in today's world, you're going to see a lot of backlash publicly as well as legally if your product causes any harm. Next, we want to talk about privacy and data protection. Now, this is a big area as well when it comes to starting a business. You want to make sure that you have a website with terms of use, privacy policies on it, and that is compliant with where you are. For example, in California, there's a CCPA. Depending on where you're selling to Europe, there's the GDPR laws that you have to be compliant with. So it depends on what you're selling and where you're selling it. But no matter what, it's very important you have clear terms on your website that say what the rights are of consumers, what happens if there's an issue, return policies. If you're doing automatic billing, you have to make sure you're compliant with the laws. For example, California has clear automatic billing laws that you have to comply with, and making it easy for people to cancel. If you don't comply with those laws, you're going to be in violation and now face liability. As well as on the privacy side, what happens if there's a data breach? How do you protect people's data? What are you doing with people's data? Very important questions you need to answer and make sure you're cognizant of as you start your business, because today people take these privacy policies very, very seriously. You see what's happening happening with these larger companies, with the social media companies out there utilizing and abusing people's data. You do not want to be in that situation. So make sure you are clear with your privacy terms. Make sure they're compliant based on where you're selling in Europe or US. Make sure that your terms of use are clear. Make sure that your terms of service are clear and concise and answer a lot of your clients' questions. Next, we're getting to taxation. So taxation is a complex area as well. We touched on it a little bit when we talked about business formation. But what you need to know about taxation is that it is going to be a big driver in the business structure, and also something that you need to think about when it comes to compliance and also financial planning. With taxation, you want to make sure that you are looking at how your entity is going to be taxed, what the local and state taxes are going to be, and making sure that you're filing the necessary returns to be compliant with the local, state, and federal laws. Now, taxation is a broad, vast area. What I recommend is get a great bookkeeper and get a great accountant. Those are the two of the essential people you need in your business as you start a business, okay? A lawyer, a great accountant, and great bookkeeping. If you don't have those things in place, it's going to be very difficult later on as your business grows because it's going to be a mess. A good bookkeeper will make sure your books are in order, make sure that your costs are being expensed correctly, making sure that you can write off everything you can possibly, and that's where a CPA or an accountant comes in as well. They will help you understand what you can write off. And this is huge for business because you do not want to be paying taxes on things you can write off. And oftentimes as a business owner, the write-offs are one of the biggest perks early on because you can write off so much as a business owner as you start to build your business. When it comes to taxation, make sure you have these key people in place on your team, a good legal advisor, a good tax advisor, and a good bookkeeper. Because without those people, you're going to have a very difficult time scaling and you're going to most likely run into issues because you don't know what you don't know. That's the issue. Having an expert or trusted advisor on that team helping to guide you who's done it before is incredibly valuable and a fantastic investment and ROI because it will not only help you make more money, but it'll also save you a lot of money and headache and time, which is oftentimes one of the biggest challenges with building a business. Next, we talk about a topic that is close to my heart, contracts. Okay, I'm a transactional lawyer and this is what I do day in and day out. Contracts are critical to the success of a business. A bad contract means potential liability, potential litigation. It means it may be broken trust. Contracts are critical because they essentially put down the terms that people are agreeing to. It creates trust. It facilitates trust between parties. People sometimes ask, well, why do I need a contract? I can just do a handshake deal. The contract is, works out the details of that deal. Yes, we can have a nice conversation and shake hands about what we're going to do. But that's when the lawyers come in and say, oh, well, what about these issues that we need to consider? What about these other issues? Oftentimes we get so excited about doing something as a client, and I see clients all this time, say, oh yeah, we got these terms. But I said, well, what about this? What about disputes? What about other things that come up? Lawyers are tasked with the sometimes unenviable job of trying to figure out what all the problems may be with the deal. And oftentimes that causes our clients sometimes consternation because they're like, well, I just want to get this done. Let's go, move forward, fast. But rushing into things oftentimes leads to bad outcomes. We like to think things through. We like to analyze every issue involved in this because oftentimes that'll save you a lot of time and energy. Maybe you think it's a good deal, but not until we actually get under the hood and look at things will we actually know that. People are great at sales nowadays. You have people selling all the time and people will make claims to you that are not always true. And that's where the lawyer comes in to say, hey, is this actually right? Is what they're saying true about this deal? And that's where contracts come in. We can put it all in writing. We say, hey, you're making certain representations and warranties. We want to put that in here because if it's not true, then we can break this deal and we get our money back. We want to know what we're getting. We want to know that the other party is going to be able to perform. There's so many elements of contracts that we need to look at when entering into agreement with someone. That's where contracts are so important. And good contracts, there's a big difference between something you find online and a contract that a lawyer drafts. The difference is that we ask questions that are not going to always be asked when you're going through a form online. There's a basic form you can download and you fill it out thinking, okay, well, this should be, it's fairly standard. But oftentimes there's questions that need to be understood, and that comes from discovery. That comes from us understanding you and the nuances of your deal. So having a great contract in place is really important to the success of any deal. And you want to make sure that that contract avoids any ambiguity, any vagueness, because if there is ambiguity in that contract, again, it's going to lead to litigation. And that's what you don't want. You want contracts to keep you out of litigation. That means contracts that'll protect you. And oftentimes, if you are getting a contract from the other party and you don't have legal representation, that's a huge risk because now they have an upper hand. They have someone arguing on their behalf, but who do you have advocating on your behalf? And that's where a lawyer comes in as well. Lawyers are your advocates. They advocate for your rights, they advocate for your protection, and that's the investment you're making in your business, as you want to advocate on your side to get you the best deal, to get you the best terms, and to protect you in a way that prevents future litigation and liability. So when it comes to contracts, don't take them lightly. Don't just sign something. Make sure you are reviewing it. Make sure you're understanding all the terms. Get a term sheet in place. I love to see LOIs or term sheets first, and I love to be involved in that negotiation process too, because if a lawyer is not involved in that LOI or term sheet negotiation, now we can only do so much to help negotiate the terms. If essential terms are already set, I can't do much. I can also only draft the longer form agreement, but oftentimes if there are terms that we could have gotten a better deal on or negotiated in some way, I can't do much about that because we've already signed the term sheet or the LOI. So bring in your legal advisor soon or early in the process, and let us be your confidant, your advisor, your advocate to get you the best terms possible. Next, we move to health and safety. Now, this is important because if you have a brick and mortar location, even if you're working remotely, you have certain rules and regulations concerning OSHA and worker rights to make sure that your workers are safe. So if you're in a facility, if you're in a warehouse, you have OSHA, which regulates oftentimes workers in these kinds of facilities, and you want to make sure that you're compliant with these laws. OSHA does have very strict regulations, and if you are violating any of them, they could shut you down. There's huge fines that could be assessed. So when it comes to health and safety, make sure your workers are working in proper ergonomic conditions if they're remote. Do they have good desks? Do they have good monitors? Are they working in the right position? Because if they get carpal tunnel, if they have some other issue, they could make a workers' comp claim. So anytime a worker is hurt on the job, they could make a workers' compensation claim, and now you're going to be having to pay for that, or your insurance is going to have to pay for that, and your workers' comp insurance is going to go up. So really important that you are looking out for the health and safety of your employees or workers, making sure that not just in a brick and mortar or warehouse facility, but also even remote, are they working in proper ergonomic conditions to prevent any kind of workers' comp claim or other insurance claim that could arise. Next, we move to e-commerce and online businesses. Now, this is a big area nowadays, especially with the pandemic that just happened. A lot of businesses moved online, and there are some nuances there to means to run an online business versus a brick and mortar business. An online business means that you have a great website, maybe have a SaaS business, but you also have to make sure that you're compliant with all the laws. We talked about privacy policies, terms of use, return policies, and all these are kind of contracts and agreements that you need to make sure that you have in place. Then it comes to, if you're selling products online, you want to make sure that you are compliant with these sales tax and you're registered to pay these sales taxes, okay? Not just in the state where you reside, but also other states. You could very well be liable for sales tax in Louisiana, in Texas, if you're selling from California. It doesn't matter. You need to make sure that you are compliant with all these state sales tax obligations. This is a huge area that trips up a lot of clients and something to keep in mind as you start your online business. Last but not least, we're talking about exit strategies, okay? And this is actually something that maybe should have been mentioned in point one, because when you form a business, oftentimes you want to think about the end as well when you're starting that business, all right? You want to have the end in mind when you start that business, because the type of business you create will oftentimes be dictated by the type of business you want to end up with. If you want to have an IPO, that's going to be one type of business versus a business that just throws off some profit and it's going to be a lifestyle business. So what is your exit strategy? What do you want to happen? Do you want to just have this business for the rest of your life? Do you want to say, okay, well, maybe in 10 years I want to sell it for a lot of money? Those are really big things to consider. And also having a buy-sell agreement with your partners. This is really important when you talk about contracts in a company. If you're an LLC, you want an operating agreement and you want to buy sell. If you have a corporation, you want to buy sell. A buy sell agreement will dictate what the terms are if someone wants to leave the company. If a founder, shareholder, early stages of company wants to leave, that means you want to have this agreement in place that says, okay, well, here's how we're going to value your shares or value your interest in the company if someone wants to leave and for what reason. This tool states, okay, here's how we're going to value the interest. Here's how we're going to pay for it. Oftentimes they buy insurance to pay for someone's interest in the company. So if they leave, the insurance policy maybe can pay out on whatever the value of the shares are. We agree to say, hey, maybe the value of the shares are $1 a share if someone wants to leave. So the company doesn't have a huge financial burden or liability that they have to pay if someone tries to leave, but maybe it doesn't have a ton of cash in the bank. So the exit strategy is something you want to think about as you start your business. You want to think about, okay, what happens if someone leaves, a founder leaves? What happens if we want to dissolve? What happens to the IP? What happens to these things things at the end if someone leaves or if the business doesn't work out, because it's a reality. No one wants to think about anything failing. We live in a world where we gotta succeed, or everything's gonna be successful if we just put our mind to it. But the reality is a lot of businesses do fail. A lot of businesses don't work out exactly as planned, and having a plan in place, if that happens, is hugely beneficial and saves you a lot of time and money. Because I'll tell you that these partnership disputes, these disputes that arise when things don't work out, or even when things do work out, are very costly and very frustrating to a lot of founders and can kill businesses. I've seen it. I've seen companies that have done super well, made millions of dollars, but the founders are going to fight, and because they didn't have the right contracts in place, and it caused them years of litigation, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, all because they got greedy and because they didn't know who they were working with. And at the end of the day, they couldn't make things work because they couldn't communicate. So as you start your business, I want you to think about all these things, but also recognize that it's a risk, it's a fun journey, it's something that is hugely rewarding, and you're going to learn so much in that whole process. I can't tell you that as an entrepreneur myself, I've learned so much over the last 14 years, from starting with nothing, moving out to California with just my car full of my stuff, and building a business, building a law firm, that has been very successful over the years, and doing it on my terms. It's hugely exciting, but you've got to be with it. You've got to be persistent. You got to recognize it's going to take years, not months. Generally, this is a long process that you're going to want to be committed to, and be persistent. You've got to make sure you can weather the ups and downs. Make sure you have the right team in place, but then you're persistent with the idea. You will see setbacks, you'll see challenges, but you continue to move forward. And one thing I'll leave you with that helped me, a bonus, number 11, is having a great business coach. I've had business coaches for most of my career, and they've been fantastic. And there have been different coaches at different places in my career, but I'll tell you that I would not have been as successful as I have been without those business coaches. And part of that was because I was able to also build relationships from those coaches. Those coaches helped me see my business in a different way, that helped me evaluate it objectively, but also helped me build relationships with other people that they were connected with. My business coach sent me tons of clients over the years because of our relationship, and because he saw the value of the work, who I was, and trusted me to do a great job and make people look good. So build those relationships, get a business coach if you can, and have fun on this journey. So that'll do it. That'll conclude our list of 10+1 tips for starting a successful business. I wish you the very best. Please subscribe or like below, and we can't wait to see you again. Thanks.